Hello, everyone. APIs are eating the universe and bringing it all together at the same time. API platforms are powering everything from simpler web apps to space rockets and everything in between. I bet there is an API, albeit internal, that is actually capable of launching rockets into space. Isn't that fascinating? My name is Swapnil Sapar, and I'm a principal engineer at PayPal. I love exploring APIs at the intersection of technology, business, and most importantly, people. Billions of dollars move through PayPal APIs every month. I have been part of one such flagship orders API team in different capacities. I have performed different roles during this time, as in starting with API consumer, um, then API developer, API spec designer, and then API reviewer, and then architect. In my current role, though, I oversee a large portfolio of APIs. I am also a consulting member for API Center of Excellence, which is responsible for architecting and performing the API governance tasks and building API platforms. I'm also a member of OpenAPI SIG, Special Interest Group, and few other committees and communities. It's been a journey, and I'm always eager to learn more because I'm really, really passionate about the space of APIs. If you are an API producer building a large portfolio of APIs yourself, or you're building in house API platforms that power such an infrastructure, or if you are an independent vendor building API tools or platform, this talk is for you. Speaking of people, in the context of APIs, I see them belonging in two different camps, people who consume APIs and people who produce them. Sometimes they do both at the same time, but let's assume that on a given day, they are either wearing a producer hat or a consumer hat. Now, I feel that the overall API consumer space has evolved much better than the API producer space. The overall DX for the API consumers experiences is far more better with respect to its standards, documentations, rich set of tools, resources that are required for exploring, discovering APIs, using API clients, collaborating, integrating, and so on. But I feel API producer circle has still a ton of gaps and, of course, a ton of opportunities to elevate the experiences for its stakeholders who are involved in the API production side of things. I'm going to focus on the right hand side, assessing the API health, addressing the API visibility and transparency concerns for the stakeholders involved in the API production factory. You may very well tag this as a governance, but I termed it as API quality and accountability. Here is a comprehensive, holistic, and opinionated way to visualize the health of that API production factory from the insides. When implemented correctly, this system is capable of producing and maintaining high quality APIs. This feedback driven system that puts the developers in the central and in the center and control is very important. That journey usually begins with first accountability, which is an important aspect of API quality, and often which gets often overlooked, but critical to building trust and transparency among API developers, leaders, and executives. When the stakeholders are empowered with such a transparent system, it elevates the quality of the APIs, and this in turn leads to increased adoption, customer satisfaction, and ultimately greater business success. So let's imagine any enterprise company, or for that matter, your own business that is producing APIs at scale today. Typically, these API move through some kind of life cycle that looks like this. We imagine various signals that are coming through these different life cycles. And let's start from the left hand side with the define. This is where a lot of planning happens, the business problem discovery discussions happen, scopes and visibility of the API is being defined, public, partner, internal, depending upon who the customer is. And towards the end of it, we also provision the pipeline. So that is that is a possibility, that is a placeholder to receive many signals that are um, that can be useful to power up our dashboard. Design is where the actual technical API specifications get drafted. Uh, Maybe auth scopes are defined, or defined inside the inside the specification. Spectral rules runs in this space. OPA rules run this in space, and they report a bunch of violations, which allows you to again get some kind of signals about the design aspect of the API. In the develop phase, this is where the implementation happens. You actually realize or build the functionality. We start off with code gen in many places, and then we actually build the services, the business logic behind it. And of course, we have some unit and integration testing happening in this phase. And you can get signals about the test reports, test failures, and you can also get some of the feedback from the analysis, the static code analysis that you can perform on your own on that implementation. Testing is where end-to-end testing happens, contract testing, exploratory test, from testing pyramid, if you recall, and also security scans can happen at this stage to be able to assess various security vulnerabilities in the design or the uh, de- development of that API specification. Obviously, deploy is where things will enter into the production phase. We also end up doing publishing the API, making sure its documentation is set up correctly for the consumers. Given if it's a public facing API, there's a lot more importance given to that phase. Given to that aspect of the API consumer experiences. And if you have things like other tools where you allow your customers to explore APIs, you set those up, for example, Postman. Collections and whatnot. So in the last phase, this is the perpetual phase where we end up monitoring and observing engineering and business KPIs. I have included both because they both are important. Maybe it could be latency, error rates, adoption, to conversion, product conversions, monetization, revenue, and so on. So these are all the places where you can see different signals can be tapped through the API life cycles. Now, by the way, this cycle repeats with more features, more capabilities, more operations, more APIs, and so on, until the evolution leads to some kind of a deprecation or creation of a brand new API or a style of API, from maybe REST to GraphQL to gRPC or something else, right? So this evolution continues. Also, if you notice that all these systems that evolve together, the product requirement also change, the customer journey also changes, the market situation change, and to be able to adapt to those new situations, our underlying APIs change, as well as the platform and the production factory also goes through a huge change in terms of its new set of policies. New rules get added to the rule set. Guidelines are changed, and new checks, new tests, new scans. As and when we evolve, all of the system also changes. So this system needs to keep up with respect to the change that is happening in the market, in the API, as well as in the API production factory and all the systems, the infrastructure that powers it. So now imagine being able to capture all possible signals throughout this API production lifecycle. These signals are not new, by the way. They already exist in the SDLC toolset and in the observability platform. Here are few that I'm just going to name, starting with API catalog, API design reviews, API spec validations, maybe Spectral or OPA, API mocks, microservice static code analysis, conformance checks, CI pipeline is a big source to tap into these signals. GitHub pull request checks, similar category. Test reports, test data collection systems, that allows you to trend your test reports based on historical context. And then there are a few more things like contract testing reports, performance tools, security scans, and the entire observability platform, SRE, incident management system, number of PagerDuty incidents you have received on a particular API or an operation, business metrics, and various sorts of inputs or KPIs with respect to that. They all can be fed into this API lifecycle. And if you look into this system of tools and platforms, you will from the lens of API health, you will find many such signals, and that's an opportunity. Next, we take these signals and ingest them through a four-step process: analyze, process, visualize, and actionize. All four are very important. Begin with improving the quality of the signal. I think we want every signal that is coming into the system to have a certain level of threshold when it comes to its quality. Remove the false positives and false negatives so that the strength is higher for this signal. Next, assign them with some kind of a unique ID or a description or a category based on how you want to bucket them. Phase, life cycle phases is one of them. But more importantly, assign them with some kind of a severity. Not all the issues are of the same importance. Of course, when we have a PX or a P1, it's non-negotiable. It is a blocker issue. If it is a coding or a formatting issue that deals with maybe operations not defined in an alphabetical order, well, it'll be nice to fix, but it's a minor or info. Next, we make every single issue actionable. We have to make sure that if we are producing signal that is kept, it should follow through with respect to its being able to take action on and to be able to recover from it. Provide enough context through why, where, how. Provide deep links into the literature or documentation that you may have, samples for to complement with it, and provide that non-compliant and compliant examples, provide hints on how to recover from it. And last one, shift left at all possible opportunities. Produce these signals as early as possible. Run test scans in the SDLC lifecycle. Produce actionable feedback with the hints to recover in the native environment. Make that experience seamless as spell check. Right? You get a signal, you recover from it right there and there, and that's how. If you do build things that way, with that intention, with that goal, things will start going in the right direction. If you do maintain an SOR for all these issues, you can perform some kind of an analysis for it. And that's important for deriving higher level of signals for stakeholders. So who are these stakeholders, by the way? I classify them into three broad roles: developers, leaders, and executives. Each one of them has a knowledge, responsibilities, distinct control on their dashboard, and a decision making processes regarding the API production factory. And these are based on specific signals that are meant for them. Starting with developers, API spec developers. These are people who produce APIs, implement APIs. They realize any change in the API behavior. And ultimately, these developers have to lift a finger to write the code, fix the code, ship the code. And they are foundational to the foundational stakeholders to the API production factory. Next up is leaders. These are API reviewers, architects, product managers, engineering managers, senior managers, directors, and so on. They too have to lift a finger to make certain higher level decisions around planning, backlog, capacity, strategy, skills, training needs of the teams based on where the gaps are, build versus buy decisions, cost sometimes, and so on. Executives, these are very important set of stakeholders, and it is very important to give them an accurate summary view of the API production factory, but they are often forgotten in that context. I assume uh, many of you are either building these tools or platform providers. I urge you with this question: does your system or platform defines executive as a role in its permission setting? What view or report of your system is curated for these executives? What signals can we produce for them so that they can take possible actions based on those signals? Can they see an overall health or org health from trending, whether it is trending up or down, the historical context? Do they get the bird's eye view of various portfolios that they lead? either directly or through their staff members? And can they make some strategic decisions around looking at that information? Can they make strategic decisions around funding, budget, revenues, initiatives, capex, reorgs, um, to balance the needs of various organizations based on the signals that we produce in business KPIs? Sometimes also they have to manage, and that's where they can tap into some of the signals that are coming here, and overall they are responsible for the future vision of the factory. So how do we achieve this? Here is my opinionated recipe, where we start with an org structure. We have a team of developers at the bottom. They are led by managers. This hierarchy could be shallow or deep depending upon your number of levels in your org. Then they report into executives and, of course, then the CEO. Next, we associate each API with its owner, that is a specific leader. This mapping is strictly one to one, which or one to many, meaning that given API can only be owned by a single leader at a time, no co-ownership. But a leader may own more than one API, multiple APIs. So every leader, every owner, leader, executives of the org hierarchy has its own set of portfolios to deal with. Each portfolio is a collection of one or more APIs plus one or more sub portfolios. APIs are owned by leaders directly or transitively through an owner in their staff. Next, we roll up uh, Next, we roll up all these signals and issues from API lifecycle phases and associate them with the leader's portfolio. These issues are based on the severity. So we start with API signals, then we ended up converting them into issues, and then we assign them the priority. And now we try to deduce the overall portfolio health grade based on those issues. And we can implement a very simple health grading system here using the letters A, B, C, D, and E. If API has at least one blocker issue, then it's E. If at least one critical issue, then it's D, and so on. API with no known issues gets a grade A. Next, how do we roll this up? There are a few options when it comes to putting all this together in the form of a portfolio numbers. You can do an average, you can do medians. I like to keep it simple by simply aggregating it, which means that sum up all the issues from individual APIs or all of the portfolios, sub portfolios, and sum them up and just transitively apply the same grades as before. Even if there is one blocker issue in that portfolio, the entire portfolio gets the E rating. Now, I can talk about this all day, but I thought, why not show you such a system in action? So I have created this raw proof of concept app where you can visualize. Please note that the data that you are going to see is all made up and stuffed data. Let me move here and shift. Okay. Here you can see you're looking at a portfolio at the top of the chain. Now, of course, Andy is the CEO, and he's looking at his own portfolio of API uh, across different lifecycle phases. And there is a rating up at the top for him to review and to see the historical trends of why how a particular grade has been trending over time. For example, the C here may not necessarily be altogether bad because we might have come here historically from E to D to C. So we are on the upward trajectory. So nothing to worry about. But that's the idea of being able to provide a time as an important dimension for it. Now, in the bottom here is the sub portfolio. So Andy has a couple of few of his team members who have APIs that they own. For example, Mark, Dave, and Joe here own some of these APIs. Now I can drill down into each one of their org, and now I am looking at Dev's portfolio and his his grading across all of the life cycle phases. I can drill even further down from Dev to his staff member, which is Sally, and then I can see the portfolio rating for each one of them, and then eventually to Kevin. So I can drill down using the links here at the bottom, but I can also drill up using the links here up at the top. Now, Let's take an example of having our first principle of that every single feedback must be actionable, which means that we don't want to stop at simply just providing the rating and not telling them what can they do about it. And this is where the developer persona comes into picture. We want to make sure that the developers gets to uh, see the view that they can utilize for them, drill down to a place where they can see an actionable feedback coming to them. So let's go to dev. Let's go to Sally, and let's go to Kevin. So Kevin here has three APIs in his portfolios. The authentication API is all A, no problems there. There is an analytics API which is sitting at D, and then there is an inventory API that is sitting at B. So this B for the design, by the way. So let's take a look at what makes this system actionable. If I click on this B, I get a deep link into a system where I can see whole bunch of information regarding why this particular issue has happened. More importantly, where it has happened, the deep links into the file name and the line number is very important. This is where I think a summary description is missing. Summary is present, the description is missing, and that's a problem I think for even for API documentation when the meaningful descriptions are missing. So that needs to be fixed, and they get to see this, and not just where, they also get to see why this issue has happened, and there is more explanation about what makes this policy important and what makes it worthy of a major severity. And then in the bottom, I see some examples of non-compliant code samples and the compliant solution. So this is very important, and to be able to show them a way to recover from easily and reliably. And I think with the onset of generative AI, we can see many of these experiences can be powered using the ability of the generative AI to generate code. So that's one example. Let's go back to another example. Let's find out why the analytics API is sitting at D. And if I click on that, I get another view. And this time looks like this is an implementation code. There is a controller. And I noticed that there is a path, there is an operation here which is opened up, but this particular operation is not documented in the contract, which is a big deal. If it's a public facing API, this could be a security issue, and that's not good. That's not good for the API, for the organization, and that's why this is higher in the order of priority in the severity chain, and this needs to be fixed. And similar experiences about providing why and how to recover from it, but this feedback is actionable to the developers. So we drill up for the leaders and we drill down all the way for the developers to make that feedback actionable so that they can recover from it. So let's go back to our part. All right. And so here is the sort of the summary of everything that we just talked about. Much of what I discussed can be categorized as a governance. That API governance is crucial for enterprise success. While many see governance as a mere function of enforcement, but that's not true. It encompasses much more beyond enforcement. Embedding enforcement guidance throughout the API lifecycle by providing the developer level signals leads to much more better experiences and improved policy compliance. Rather than receiving all that feedback towards the last moment, the integrated governance ensures that the feedback positive experiences for all of the stakeholders in the API production factory. I believe in driving change through such a transparent and a visible system that provides actionable feedback and a path of recovery for all of the stakeholders. This systematic and pragmatic approach improves the lives of the health of the enterprise API production, as well as the well-being of those responsible for it. Thank you. Here are the links to my slides and demo app if you want to follow along and see this particular app in action um, for your own exploration.